Hey, thanks for coming out to the channel today. I wanted to take a minute to thank all the subscribers. Thank you so much for being here and for participating in this channel, and for everybody that's new here today. Think about hitting the subscribe button. It helps out the channel. So, guess what we're going to talk about today? Well, have you ever wondered if all calcium supplements are created equal? Well, you and we're going to go look at buying calcium supplements and figure out what you need to know when you're looking to buy calcium supplements. Ready, set, let's go. Okay, so I know. Oh, look, it was pretty cold out this morning. Yeah, that's ice on my windshield. And look at all that fog. Okay, so I know that it's natural to want to head out to your grocery store or to your local discount store to pick up your supplements, because that seems easy and convenient. I mean, that's why those stores are there, right?
Let me tell you, don't do it.
Okay, I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't do it. But first, hey, let me show you what I saw this morning, because it was beautiful out here. We had so much fog and it was freezing out there. So I was dressed appropriately to run from my car to the store, but it was a little bit cold out here. And it was that wet, bone-chilling cold that comes in the Pacific Northwest. So let's get back to these calcium supplements while we're watching what was going on in the Pacific Northwest. And that's actually the Columbia River. So it's a huge river, and probably not as big as the Mississippi, but it is a huge river. And it was great to be out there. And being that I was out there so early, guess what? Nobody else was out there. So I really appreciated that. Okay, so let me get back to this calcium thing. So why not? Okay, I'm going to go over 7 different types of calcium, and 3 of them, you know what? I don't really like, and they've historically been not that effective for getting calcium into the body. And then there's another 4 of them that have historically been good for you. Okay, so let me tell you, one of the issues today, oh, yeah, and this was just gorgeous. It was so nice just being out there by myself. Okay, let me get back to one of the big issues today is that large corporations, they've finally figured out how to take over the narrative on the internet, and they've been pretty effective at this. I've been pretty bummed to see some of this, and for this episode, I was just going to go out and grab some of the research off of PubMed, but when I went out there, I found a lot of the recent research on supplements was being presented by large pharmaceutical companies. And not only have they been taking over the narrative on supplements, they were also limiting the narrative to things that were probably more profitable for them, not more beneficial for you or more effective for you. So I'm going to touch a little bit on that in this episode. But before we go on, let me show you the calciums that we're going to cover, okay? So the 3 that I don't like: calcium carbonate, calcium diphosphate, and dibasic calcium phosphate. And then I like these: calcium citrate, calcium gluconate, calcium orotate, and calcium lactate. So those are the 7 that we're going to go over. And so let's look at what you can find in your local, easy to access grocery store. So that's why I got up early so I could show you this. So here I am in our local discount superstore, and you can see it says calcium 600 milligrams. And then the ingredients it says calcium carbonate. Now, remember that was one of the 3 that I didn't like. And here's another one, a little bit harder to read on this one. But again, it just says that it's calcium 600 milligrams. And then you have to go to the ingredients to actually see what kind of calcium it is. And it wasn't just the calcium supplements. I looked at some of those name brands that have huge market share. And when I looked at the ingredients on this, if you look under supplement facts, the second to the last one, it shows calcium 300 milligrams. And then go over to the ingredients, calcium carbonate. And look at this. Go down a couple, it's basic calcium phosphate. Now, this is really interesting because basic calcium phosphate used to be called calcium triphosphate. And, when I didn't know what this basic calcium phosphate was, I had to look it up. And, when I first read that, I'm like, basic calcium phosphate. I mean, to me, it sounds like battery acid. So from a marketing perspective, I think they need to find a different name. But that's just me, just thinking. Okay, so this is what you're finding in your local grocery stores, your local discount supermarkets, your super warehouses. This is what you're getting if you go to a retail facility that you walk into and purchase your supplements. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about calcium, okay? You know how on all the labels they say calcium. So you can see this go all the way down to the bottom, the second from the bottom, it just says calcium. Well, and then they stuff it over here in under ingredients that it's calcium carbonate. Me, the basic consumer, we are not going to do that. We're not going to go look and read through everything on the back of their label to try and figure out what's in there. That's not convenient. If we were going to do that, we certainly would not have gone to the local discount grocery store or local discount retailer to pick up our supplements. And I kind of think that those marketing moguls, they kind of know that, and that's why they set it up that way. You cannot take pure calcium. Pure calcium is toxic to you and me. So what they have to do in order for us to be able to consume supplements is they have to take a calcium molecule or a calcium atom and combine it with something else. And so calcium plus carbonate is calcium carbonate, and calcium plus phosphate, becomes calcium diphosphate, or if you do it with 3 phosphates, it's now basic calcium phosphate instead of calcium triphosphate. Or if you combine it with a citrate, it's calcium citrate. So that's the idea. In order for us, you and me, to be able to consume calcium, it cannot be in its pure form because that would kill us. So, and if you're curious what would happen, because calcium's super reactive with water, go out to YouTube and pull up a query for calcium and water interactions to see what would happen. Okay, so it cannot be just a pure calcium. So even though you and I need calcium, and even though it's the most abundant metal in your body, you can't use it in its pure form. It has to be combined with something so that you can consume it. Okay. So each of these different calciums then, being that they're all different, they've been combined with something else, they have different abilities to be absorbed in the body. Wow, I bet you saw that one coming, right? Okay. And you know what? The ones that have the least ability to be used by the body, or the least ability to be absorbed by the body, or maybe are slightly harmful to you, guess what? They're the least expensive to produce. Who knew? Oh, let me do that again.
Who knew?
So if you're looking in your discount stores and grocery stores where price points matter, you're going to be looking at products that can be resold to the consumer inexpensively. I mean, the goal there isn't your health. The goal there is price points. So you're going to find products that are the most inexpensive to produce. Surprise, right? Sorry for us. Okay. So when you're looking at calcium supplements, the first thing you're going to want to do is look at the label. And if the label says just calcium, well, then whoever's producing that calcium, they're not very proud of their product. And they don't really want you to think about what it is that they're feeding you. So you're probably guessing that the calciums that are most inexpensive to produce and that also have questionable ability to absorb are the 3 most common calciums you're going to find in your grocery stores. And that's the first 3 that I talked about: calcium carbonate, calcium diphosphate, and calcium triphosphate. Bad. Okay, so let's talk about calcium carbonate first. Okay, this one, surprise, least expensive to produce. And you know what? It's found in products like Tums. So why calcium carbonate can work so well at neutralizing stomach acid is because calcium's this really alkaline earth metal, and our stomach is really acidic. So calcium carbonate, it's about 40% calcium in it. And compare that to other calcium supplements. Calcium carbonate, here's the thing, it can have as much as 2 to 4 times as much calcium in it as other supplements. And you'd think with all that calcium, it'd be more bioavailable. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So what ends up happening is calciums actually need acids to be taken up in the body. And because calcium carbonate reduces stomach acid, it also reduces its own absorbability. So when you're taking calcium carbonate, your body, it can maybe absorb 20% of the calcium available, the calcium in calcium carbonate. And that means that, guess what? Yeah, this one is, whoops, let me go this way. This one is the least bioavailable of all of them. Surprise. And the least expensive to manufacture. So you think that was enough, but this is the thing that frustrates me, is there's another big risk to this type of calcium. And it used to be a big risk for people with peptic ulcers because Tums and calcium carbonate was the most common way of treating peptic ulcers. Now we have, different things that we treat peptic ulcers with, and so Tums isn't the go-to. But you know what? They're making these heavy market share supplements the go-to for postmenopausal women, especially because they're being told to supplement calcium. And, if they just go to the market, all these brands, all these products in there, they're inexpensive, seems reasonable, just grab it and go. The thing that they don't tell you is calcium carbonate can cause hypercalcemia. And guess what? That can be deadly if left untreated. Oh, that can be deadly if left untreated. Yeah, I bet they don't tell you that when they tell you to just grab a calcium supplement. And some of the symptoms of hypercalcemia, and I think they call it like alkali syndrome is what you can find it if you do a search in PubMed and you want to know more about it. I think it's alkali syndrome. Can't remember off the top of my head, but one of the more common symptoms is going to be what feels like heartburn or acid reflux and excessive thirst, excessive urination. So these symptoms of almost like diabetes. So if you're taking supplements and you're starting to notice that you're getting an upset stomach and you're you're a lot more thirsty. Oh, speaking of that, I think I'm going to have some water. Okay, you're a lot more thirsty or you're using the bathroom more often, you might want to look at your supplement and just make sure it's not a calcium carbonate. Because the other thing that they said about this one is you don't really have to take that much. It can do this on a very small dose. So that's frustrating. And here's when I start talking about, these large corporations taking over the narrative. When I went out to PubMed, calcium carbonate's cheapest thing to produce. So, and citrate is the least expensive of the good calciums to produce. So they would do a lot of studies. I saw, maybe I'll do a separate episode on this, but, there were studies by Sanofi and Novartis they actually have a calcium carbonate supplement, and they both have these calcium carbonate supplements, and they wanted to show everybody that we've done research. Our calcium carbonate supplement is great and you can take it in the body. And so they've been doing research comparing calcium carbonate to calcium citrate, but they're not comparing calcium carbonate to the gluconate, the orotate, or any of these other calciums that are out there. So again, really limiting the narrative. And I don't know what to say about that because, what do you do? Okay, let's go on. So there's also any calcium with a phosphate, just avoid any calcium with a phosphate. And why I say that is you have these calcium diphosphates and calcium triphosphates. Well, 15 years ago, that was like the most common calcium on the market. So calcium diphosphate is exactly what it is. It says 1 calcium to 2 phosphates. Okay, and then we have calcium triphosphate, and that is
1 calcium to 3 phosphate.
So phosphates, where do you find them? In meat products. So high phosphorus levels in the body encourage the elimination of calcium. Who knew, right? And they do that through urination. So you start dumping calcium through your bladder. And what they think is that the body prefers 2 calciums to 1 phosphorus. So think about the American Standard Diet, and just our basic diet flips the phosphorus to calcium levels in the body. So adding in a supplement that also flips those levels means you're just making the problem worse. I mean, from a scientific perspective, that's what I'd be thinking. Well, so then what calciums do you want? Well, for me, calcium citrate is a winner. And the body, here's what's different about that too, is the body is going to absorb 40% of calcium citrate, which is, much more than calcium carbonate. And the other thing that the research has found on calcium citrate is that it's not dependent on, your vitamin D levels or your hormone levels or these other factors in the body. So that makes this calcium one that's a good choice. that's easy to be absorbed in the body. So you'll see that a lot. They'll say calcium citrate. It's really easily absorbed in the body. I'll just say that.
Again. It's really easily absorbed in the body.
Okay, so there's one other thing. Like if you have kidney stones, well, it's calcium and a citrate. And we know from research that citrate helps reduce the formation of kidney stones. So this might be a good one if you have kidney stones, at least to try. And then what makes calcium citrate a real winner is it's easy to find. It's going to be more expensive than the carbonate and the phosphates, but it's going to be less expensive than all the rest of the calcium. Now, the one calcium that I really like is calcium gluconate, and it's going to be your most expensive calcium to produce, and it's going to be difficult to find. Now, I've always learned that gluconate was the most bioavailable and the most effective in the body. And way back in the 70s, when Shackley was leading the pack in supplement research and providing really high quality supplements, all of Shackley's calciums were calcium gluconate. Again, this is a pretty expensive one to manufacture. And so Shackley's a multi-level marketing company. So cost cutting, took them to moving to calcium citrate. Okay. So I've found one independent compounder that still does calcium gluconate. So I actually have calcium gluconate in the office. Awesome for me. Okay. Then there's calcium orotate. And this one's really interesting. There was a German doctor, back a few years ago, Dr. Hans Nieper, I think is his name. And he did a lot of research on this. And he found that the absorption of this calcium is like over 90%. And they think that this calcium can cross the cell membrane. Now, that would be the only calcium that can. And they also think from the research that this one is actually supposed to be good for bone health. So if you're a woman, you're postmenopausal, and your doctor told you to do calcium, I would try this one, And I certainly wouldn't try one that they recommended in the pharmacy at the hospital. Okay, just a thought. Now, there's one last one that I think is a good calcium, and that's calcium lactate. This is the one that you're going to find in milk. Now, I don't usually recommend this one to older adults because it's more of an acidic calcium. And when we're older, we're already more acidic. So being acidic, it can make symptoms that are acidic worse, like arthritis, heartburn, or things like that. And a lot of us already notice that, when we try to drink milk, we're like, oh, I'm feeling awful. My joint pain's worse. I'm all phlegmy. So it can make those things work. But you know what? It works out fine for kids because kids are alkaline. Okay, so that was a lot of information right there. So let's take a little bit of a breather, get back out into nature, clear out our head. And let's just kind of take a quick review over what we were talking about. So 3 calciums that I don't think are helpful. Hey, can you hear the geese? I couldn't see them. They're gonna fly right overhead, and with all this fog, I could not see them. And you can also hear the sound of the boats coming up the river, so you can hear their horns. Okay, so there was 3 calciums that I just don't think that they're beneficial to you, and there's enough research that says they're not. And so, and the big problem with the research today is you're seeing large corporations taking over the narrative on supplements of all things. I mean, what's the profit margin on supplements? So the 3 I didn't like: calcium carbonate. calcium diphosphate, dibasic calcium phosphate. You know, that one that sounds like battery acid? It used to be called tricalcium or calcium triphosphate, and they repackaged it and are remarketing it as dibasic calcium phosphate. And I just don't think that's a good name. I don't know. What do you think? Does it sound like something you want to consume, or does it sound like something you put in your battery? Okay, don't know, but okay. Let's talk about the ones that I think can help you. Okay, calcium citrate, calcium gluconate, calcium orotate, and calcium lactate. What if you're looking for bone health? What's a good one for that? Calcium orotate. What's the one that is really easy on the stomach and has really good uptake, and you don't have to worry about what your vitamin D levels are or your hormone levels? Calcium citrate. Now, the one I like the most, calcium gluconate. And you know what? I forgot to tell you, that one is supposed to be actually the most bioavailable to the body. That's why I like that one. And then what's the one calcium that we find in milk? Calcium lactate. Good for kids, maybe not so good for adults. And why is it not so good for adults? Is because it's more of an acidic calcium. So it would maybe emphasize things like joint pain or being phlegmy. You know, it'd help that whole situation to get worse. Okay, so what's one thing that you want to do when you're looking? What are two things you want to do when you're looking to buy calcium? Yeah, don't go to the retail store and try and buy it, right? And why is that? Well, because they're using the bad calciums. And how do you know that? Because when you look at the label, it says calcium, 600 milligrams. It doesn't say what type of calcium it is. And if you were really proud of what you were delivering, you'd have that right out there. You'd be, hey, look at me. Look at how great I am. And they're more like, hey, it's calcium. If you're motivated, you can go read through the whole back of the label and maybe you'll find out what kind of calcium it is. So there it is. 3 calciums, not so good for you. 4 calciums, I like them. 2 things to think about besides the type of calcium. 2 things to think about when you're buying things. Not your local retail discount superstore. And if it just says calcium, then they're not very proud, and they're probably using one of those 3 calciums that are inexpensive and not so good for you. Which ones do you like? Citrate, gluconate, orotate, lactate, right? Those 4. Citrate, gluconate, orotate, lactate. Okay, guys, I hope that helps you as you're buying some of your supplements. Because you know what? You've got to get savvy about this stuff. Since you're spending your money, you're going to want to spend it on something that's better than dirt, okay? Until next time, I'll catch you on the other side.